Okay, welcome everybody to this interview with Lora Sorg. I am Dave Lazinski from davidlazinski.com, also known as the Esoteric Nerd, and I'm looking forward to interviewing Lora because I've done some work with her myself, and Lora, among other things, does a great job of combining both very spiritual, esoteric, deep conversation and support with very practical support. And that's one of the reasons why I'm interviewing her and putting this kind of information out there, because I believe we have to learn that the spiritual side of things are important and can be easily applied to our life in this busy modern society. So a little bit about Lora. First of all, you can get more information about her at thehealingintent.com. She also has spent a lot of time studying psychology and counseling, and actually began her life in the career field in international management, and has an MBA in business. So my first question for you, Lora, is how does somebody who has all of this experience in the business world and with travel end up working with people on such deep aspects of their health and healing?
Well, it's been quite a journey, Dave. I did start out my career first in banking and then as a management consultant. I lived and worked all over Europe and Asia for many years. And while I enjoyed my career, I was always slightly disappointed in the level and depth of meaning, spirituality, social responsibility in the companies that I was working for. And ultimately, I just felt very unfulfilled and dissatisfied. So I left that field to go back to school to study psychology and counseling. And during that time, I started having a lot of unusual experiences. I would call them spiritual experiences now. At the time, I was not spiritual at all, and I didn't know what they were. But actually, I started hearing a voice inside
Mm.
my head. It's called the small still voice. It was my intuition knocking at my door. Again, I didn't know what it was, but it had information that was very accurate for me. It felt very different from my own internal thoughts. And so eventually I went and saw somebody to figure out what it was. I went and saw a psychic. And that was an interesting experience. I walked in her office and she said, "Oh, you have the gift." And I didn't know what that meant, but here I am today. That was about 16 years ago.
Very
And
cool.
yeah, it's been definitely been a journey. When I heard that voice, not only was it accurate information that I was getting, but the bigger experience, Dave, was that it just felt more right than anything else had ever felt in my life to listen to that voice and follow it. And so I did.
Very good. So you went to a psychic to find out that you were psychic. That's a smart move on your part.
Exactly.
So let's talk about that for a moment because I really think this is important. So I want to pick your brain. How would you consult with somebody and tell them the difference between what their intuition might sound like versus what an emotional fear type thought might sound like? So if they were to ask a question like, should I switch careers? What might sound different if it was their intuition speaking to them versus if it was a fear-based thought? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I talk to people about that a lot. You know, Dave, we're all intuitive. All of us were born with this sixth sense ability. But unfortunately, we've been raised in a society that doesn't encourage it. You know, our culture is very left brain, very logically based. And there is a lot of fear about following that voice because it will often lead you in directions that the rational mind, the rational world, the world of insurance and security and savings and being responsible, maybe wouldn't recognize as being a valuable path.
Yeah.
But we're all intuitive. The difference between someone on the street and a professional intuitive is the professional has just really developed that sixth sense, that skill.
Mhm.
There's a lot of ways that we can receive our intuitive guidance, through pictures, through an inner voice, which is what came to me. It's called the small still voice. Through feelings. You walk into a room and it just feels wrong. You get a funny feeling in your stomach.
Mhm.
Through a knowingness. Um, there's a number of different ways that, and there's words for all of those. I don't think we have time to go into that today, but I could. But really, there's so many different ways that we can receive information. And the best way to determine whether it's just your thoughts or whether it's something underneath that really has value in the information is to get quiet. That's why meditation is so important. And it doesn't have to be an hours long process of sitting and lighting candles and oming. I mean, all of that has great value, but it's just sitting down and getting quiet and asking yourself, is this really valuable information, or is this just my thoughts, going off?
Have you ever had spiritual information come up from behind you and slap you in the back of the head, Laura?
I would just about every day, Dave.
Good. Okay. Because it's happened to me a couple of times, and I was just curious if you had the same experience.
Yeah.
So you had some voices begin at a certain time in your life, and you very intelligently began to talk with people who might know what's going on, and that helped you out. But before that, as you grew up as a child and in your teen years, did you ever have any experiences? When you look back, did you have anything happen that you would say was some type of a spiritual awakening or even just a spiritual, esoteric, mystical kind of experience?
I did, Dave. I had a lot of those experiences as a child, and I had no idea that they were any different from anyone else, and maybe they weren't. I don't know, but I did have a lot of situations where I would drop into what I call the void, which is this big, expansive place. It can actually be kind of terrifying to go in there in your consciousness. I've also had a lot of experiences of total expansiveness, of being at one. And these happened when I was a child. I didn't know what was going on, but just thought they were part of the fabric of life. I did receive a lot of information as a child. I remember always, knowing what people should do and telling them. And the funny thing is they often followed, even as a child, what I would suggest that they do. And then I found myself in the field of management consulting. My background is business and finance. But again, I always knew what my clients should do, didn't always know why. It was only, when I started on this path and started overtly exploring my intuition that I realized it had been there all the time.
Very nice, very nice. When you said the word void, I think back to when I was in college, and I used to play rugby, and we would start drinking after the games. And I used to fall into a void in some of those nights after
Yeah.
drinking a liter. But this sounds like a very different void that you were experiencing.
Well, when we go into these really altered, expanded states of consciousness, we can often lose the sense of who we are, which is great. We lose that personality, that ego, that sense of, I'm Laura here on this 3D reality of Earth at this particular time in life. It's a great experience if you know what to do with it, but it can be very terrifying when you lose that point of connection with existence.
That's right. And I was joking about alcohol and drugs, but the point is that oftentimes, and in our past, we have history of many people attempting to go into this void and to have spiritual experiences using drugs and alcohol. And from what I understand from my studies, it's just not the same than, like you said earlier, doing the work, the meditation. So just the thought that I had. Well, very good. So, going back a little bit to something you said earlier. Okay, so you see the psychic. You find out that you have this gift. When exactly, though, did you, or what exactly happened that made you take that official step from fully being in the business world to seeing clients on a more regular basis? When was the actual switch where you thought, you know what, I am actually going to do this for a career? What happened there?
Well, as I was in school actually studying psychology and counseling, and it just slowly evolved. I had kids and we moved back to the States. We were in Hong Kong at the time that all of this started happening. And I just kept following the voice. It led me to study a number of different spiritual traditions. I started with Buddhism and Hinduism. I was doing a lot of yoga, which it guided me to do, which is its own spiritual path. So I really started opening up to some of the wisdom that is inherent in these traditions, and just slowly started working with people. I found people coming to me and asking me questions and being able to tune in, as I said, more overtly than I had in the past. And then I took on a few clients and I seemed to really help them. And so my work today is really a combination of using the intuition to bring through information that's helpful in all areas of people's lives, whether it's relationship, money, career, home, should I buy this car? Should I marry this guy? Just the kind of the basic 3D questions that we all struggle with every day in our lives. But I also bring a lot of the psychology and counseling in, which I love to help people because so many of us are walking around with these deep blocks. We can't seem to move forward in life and really bring forth that which we want to create. And so taking people, into their psyches and clearing both energetically, and using my intuition to see the blocks, helping people to move through their stuff. And then I also teach meditation. I teach people how to develop their own intuition, and just bring through a lot of the spiritual teachings that I've encountered over the years.
So this is important to note about Lora Sorg. It's also important to note is regarding my philosophy and why I believe in doing these videos. As she just mentioned, she combines practical, real-life information with spiritual work, including helping somebody leave her office and do something on their own like meditation. What I have found, Lora, and I don't know about you, but oftentimes if we are really looking to support somebody on efficient change, of course they have to come to your office. They have to get that one-on-one spiritual support. They have to then have some tools to take with them outside of their office to develop spiritually. And then third, sometimes that list of things they have to do has something to do with spirituality. It's about practical decision-making, whether it's talking with a loved one or taking that chance at work. So really combining spirituality with real-life, practical decision-making. Did you come up with that on your own, or is that simply just what kind of flows out with you when you sit down with clients? Is it just how you present information, a mixture of spiritual and very real 3D world information?
Well, everybody's different. I never know what's going to come through in a session. Even people that I've worked with for years, I'm consistently surprised, and it's always right because depending on where a person is in their life, what's going on, sometimes it is more helpful to have that 3D guidance, in terms of, should I switch jobs or sometimes it's more helpful to have the deeper counseling aspect of it, in terms of how do I communicate with my partner? How do I help my child? How do I get along in the world? Or we can go even deeper, if that's appropriate for them at the time. How do I clear these really, really deep energetic blocks? And I'll do deep energy work with them and teach them how to do that work on themselves as they leave, to take with them. Or whether they're struggling spiritually in their connection with the divine. Is there a greater purpose in life? How do I fit into that? It just depends on where a person is, as to where the guidance will take them in that particular session.